Welcome back. You're watching live from Paris on France 24. It's time for Media Watch with James Creedon. Good evening to James.
Good evening, Laura.
Let's start with the Jimmy Savile scandal because it goes on and on. It gets wider and wider, it seems, by the day. And today, the Director General of the BBC being grilled by British lawmakers.
Back in that culture committee of the Parliament after all the News International stuff in the last year. It's pretty extraordinary.
It's one inquiry after another, isn't it?
These Pandora's boxes opening up. Absolutely. So let's take a look at some of the coverage on the media. Jimmy Savile, George Entwistle heckled by BBC reporters after a brutal grilling from MPs. This is so bad that his own journalists are actually heckling him outside the Parliament. One BBC reporter said, "Are you going to resign?"
Well, I mean, we should point out he's only been in the job a few months, hasn't he?
Right.
Not even.
Give him a chance to figure out what was actually going on back then. I think that's a fair point. But just to, I suppose, give the background to the story. This concerns a children's television presenter in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. Accusations.
Saint Jimmy, they called him.
That's right. He was kind of a household name, seen as a national treasure in the UK, and accusations of over 200 cases of child sexual abuse because he had special access to children in hospitals and elsewhere because of fundraising, charitable work, and his position as a children's television presenter. It's a horrible story. He's been linked also to, for example, Gary Glitter. I have a photo of him here.
Convicted paedophile.
That's right. So many people are saying as well, for example, one of the points raised today is that not up to 10 people, 9 for sure, other people, past and present employees of the BBC, are also being investigated surrounding this. Right. So this is a can of worms that really, who knows where it will stop. But I suppose the big question here is, did the BBC try to bury this news?
Well, of course, Entwistle was in charge, wasn't he, when that Newsnight documentary, which would have exposed some of these allegations, was about to go out. He was in charge when the decision was made to can it. That's
right. So the question is, how high up did it go? He says he didn't know anything about it, etc., etc. Now, the producer of Newsnight, the editor, Peter Rippon, has stepped aside. Let's take a look at some of the reaction online to this, Laura. Now, you've the one person here saying this is panorama about the BBC at its worst. This panorama about the BBC at its worst is the BBC at its best. Now, an explanation there is that the whole reason it's in the news today is last night there was a television show, Panorama, also by the BBC, exposing what Newsnight didn't do, right? So it's sort of, you know... you
can imagine the tension in the canteen over at the BBC HQ.
I'm sure the Newsnight desk were kind of looking into their soup a little bit embarrassed, right? So here people saying, look, the BBC, at least at some level, were doing a good job. Others saying, praising the BBC for letting Panorama investigate Newsnight, these are 2 investigative shows, is akin to praising an arsonist for tackling a fire. In other words, come on, you know, they don't really deserve much praise for what's going on here. Yeah. Now, one of the big themes on social media was all of this internal correspondence in the BBC that came out as to why the show didn't air, the original Newsnight investigative show. One of the excuses given was it was just the women providing their testimony. In other words, it was only the victims.
That was the basis of the documentary.
That's right. And for some of the bosses, they were like, well, if it's only, you know, quote unquote, I'm paraphrasing, the victims who are coming forward, then that's maybe not good enough. One person saying here, Newsnight was not satisfied to run Savile investigation based on the strength of victims' testimony alone, just for women, which became a huge theme on Twitter last night after the show aired. This, I think, sums up what a lot of people think. Just the women is exactly what victims of abuse and sexual violence believe the authorities will think and why they don't speak. So a lot of people picking up on that, saying, hold on a minute, you know, the victims' voices are often good enough, really, to go to air with, especially if there's over 200 of them.
Right. Now, I can imagine there might be a few smug faces over at News International because, of course, journalists there were in pretty much the same spot this time last year. Not, of course, because of a paedophile scandal, but because of ethics and phone tapping and all the rest of it.
That's right. Now, two pieces of information that I thought were very interesting on this, Laura. The BBC has hired the same top lawyer, a woman by the name of Dina Rose QC, who worked in the phone hacking saga, to look at how the BBC deals with these sexual harassment cases. So clearly they're looking to this recent scandal for their expertise. Another piece of information, one MP today accused Entwistle of sounding a bit like James Murdoch, who of course was Rupert's son and got grilled in front of the Culture Committee over his failure to recollect
events. It's a good time to be a media lawyer, isn't it, really?
Oh, I think there's a lot of money on it right now. And I suppose the question too, where could this stop? Max Clifford, he's a publicist in the UK, says he knew of Jimmy Savile abuse and there are more names to come out. So we'll see where this one goes. It's a horrible, horrible story.
It is indeed. All right, well, let's end on something a little more cheerful then. The presidential debate in the US, that was the third and final live television clash between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama.
That's
Obama's
right.
been widely credited with being a bit more aggressive, but Romney managed to hold his own as well, didn't he? Didn't make any big gaffes.
And there was a lot of discussion about military expenditure,
yes.
warships, and Obama,
Bayonets.
because what Romney keeps saying is that there were more warships in 1917 than there are now. And Obama said, hold on a minute, there were also more rifles, bayonets and horses, kind of, give it a break, the military has changed. So that became a big theme online, people showing Romney as some sort of old-fashioned, Napoleonic. This is him in 1917. Here he is, kind of Romney, Ryan on horses with bayonets, etc., etc. This too, and I quite like this one where they just swap their hair for no apparent reason.
Why not?
That's
just bizarre, isn't it?
This is the kind of thing you get on the internet.
It's very odd.
And they did it before with
Oh.
Ryan and... I think that one looks even more terrifying, actually.
Oh, I do love it when they
Tweedledum. Well, some
people.
say it's kind of Tweedledum and Tweedledee, so that's kind of an example of...
Oh, good stuff. All right, James Green, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much
Thanks,
indeed.
Laura.
That's it for tonight's Media Watch. Time now for more of what's going on the internet. We'll be clicking in cyberspace. We begin in Syria, where activists have mobilised to free a jailed cartoonist. Here's Web News.